Aleena Naqvi Hussain is a fashion-based photographer living in Lahore with a background in fine arts and psychology from the Art Institute of Boston and Lesley University. Having worked with a multitude of brands from Zara Shah Jahan to Republic, she has developed a minimalistic and clean aesthetic which emphasizes intimacy in movement. Hi, Aleena. Thank you. Welcome to Mukaalma series. Welcome to the Speaker Mukaalma series. Thank you for doing this. Thank you
Vanya.
for taking our time. I think, I
Not
think,
at all. Very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
thank you, thank you. So, Aleena, we would want to start from where your interest in photography developed. क्या वो जब आप because you have a fine art background, तो background जब जब आप fine arts पढ़ रही थी तब there was some interest in photography या फिर you were doing photography and later you maybe discovered your interest in fashion. Take us through that journey.
Actually, when I was doing my A levels and O levels, I've always had a very keen interest for art. So I was always very art centric, art focused. Drawing and painting and everything else was my primary medium to communicate anything. So when I applied to college, I kind of wanted a college that both amalgamated my love of art and also the practical element of wanting the security of having a business degree or some sort of degree that I could later on fall back on in case, because it's a hit or miss with art sometimes. So when I was in college, I decided I had got into a college that was both affiliated with an art institute of Boston and Lesley University. So they were both under the same umbrella, which gave me the ability to go and further explore my love of art in all mediums, be it film or photography or painting or printmaking or anything else. And also focus on psychology, and I also have a degree in business. My minor, one of them was business, just to ensure that if all else fails, my dad would be satisfied that there was some sort of backup. But while I was in school, a lot of people that I was around and surrounded by were interested in photography. And I think it was one of the starting mediums that I used to use for my artwork. So a lot of the photographs that I would take would be the basis of whatever artwork I was making at the time, be it from charcoal or oil painting. A lot of mine was with watercolors and charcoal. And so photography was the first medium, was like my first camera I bought when I was in college. It was is the medium through which I could go into my artwork. So it was like a gateway. And then when I graduated, it was out of my, I guess, peripheral view. Like there was nowhere in sight was I doing art or anything like that. I was trying to be a little more practical, settle into a role of a job and something that would be a little more steady. And when I was living in America, I was doing some things related to the field of art. First, I was a fine arts teacher for a private school in Manhattan. And then I started working for a government run organization that was building funds to give towards public schools for art divisions so that they would be an art curriculum involved in every public sector and every public school in Washington, D.C. So I was always somewhere or the other, I had my toe dipped in that field so that I would feel connected. And when I moved back to Pakistan, I think I transitioned into the world of fashion somehow. It was by chance. One of my first jobs when I came back to Pakistan was an assistant director or assistant to the assistant director of a commercial shoot for which brands near Face Fresh and Golden Pearl.
Yeah.
And so I had to go to Malaysia for a shoot, and it was an extremely interesting and vigorous experience to be a part of these commercial shoots that are very, very high stress. And one of my coworkers was actually the daughter of Nikki Nina, who runs her own. She has her own label now called Studio Meru, And she said that, you know, my mother and my khala are looking for someone to manage marketing for Nikki Nina in Lahore, and why don't you come and join us instead? Because this was only a one end project where I had to go be there for the Face Fresh commercials and then come back, and that was it. So when I came back to Lahore, I kind of started with Nikki Nina, and that was my first introduction into fashion. And I think it led me to believe that there was some part of art that was communicated through fashion as well. So मैंने अपने आप को तसल्ली दिया कि it's okay, I know you wanted to do something with art, but fashion in its own context has a huge relation to art. And then I started going from there, back and forth between fashion and business, fashion, and then with the videographers. That was where I got introduced into how you kind of amalgamate video and film and photography and translate it for content for social media purposes and for brands that wanted to communicate whatever their brand identity was through film and photography. And from there, I kind of started off going into different brands. Eventually, landed at Zara Shahjahan, which was my first like real introduction into a very established design house that has always had such a strong aesthetic. And that's where I met you also as my first one of my first models. And they had such a strong identity that they wanted to communicate with their imagery, be it their video or their BTS video or their photography or their campaigns. They're always trying to communicate some part of what they felt. Every collection, every outfit had some sort of identity attached to it, and that identity was being communicated the way it was shot. Um, and I sort of fell in love with the idea of being the bridge between what that brand has and what they want to communicate to their audience. And I was just a marketing girl, a marketing actor in-house. And I would take my phone to the shoots and I would just take pictures in between and kind of play around with my phone on the pictures. And eventually I upgraded from, well, Zara made me upgrade myself from a phone to an actual camera, and she kind of gave me my first push. Hey, I think you have something that you have to say, and this is how you can say it. So she really did. She was like the first person to push me in that direction. And once I picked up that camera and kind of, honestly, I have no real training. So I figured it out on spot. What is shutter speed? What is your aperture? What is this? What's that? How to focus? How to use this? Then I learned how to post edit in Lightroom or Capture One or any of these things. So that was it. The learning experience was very much a hands-on experience. There was no previous training, and used to have such a hard time trying to communicate what I wanted the picture to look like, but I would imagine it in my head. So when I picked up the camera, I could imagine what it was that I was looking for. And it was my way of speaking when I couldn't speak. So if I couldn't write out what I was looking to write out, I could take it with that camera. So, and I use my images now as the basis of some of my digital artwork. So I've translated onto digital and stuff. And I still, for myself, I play around with both, but obviously for keeping a roof over my head, I have the commercial shoots.
Yeah, so you were going back and forth with art and fashion and marketing and all of that, and then
Yeah.
obviously working as a teacher. Magar, when you started working in Pakistan, was there any time when you were all this while, was there any moment when you were thinking कि अच्छा मुझे ये नहीं करना, मुझे मजा नहीं आ रहा है इसमें, स्पेशली फैशन में, क्योंकि I've seen other works of yours जिसमें you're doing bridal, you've documented the Aurat March, you've done a urs, if I'm not wrong, it's Madhulal Hussain urs. So it's there's street and there's culture and there's fashion. Was there any time, because I understand as a photographer you grew out, you were growing and you were saying कि, अच्छा, this is something I can explore, this is something this and you really landed into photography and you were like अब तो मेरे पास photography है, अब मेरे पास camera है, तो मैं और भी चीजें explore कर सकती हूँ. लेकिन जब तक fashion में था, was there a moment when you were like नहीं fashion नहीं करना या कुछ और कर लेते हैं? Because for creative people that is something that comes to their mind all the time because they're fluctuating, उनको कुछ ना कुछ करना होता है.
For sure. I think fashion mein, the thing that used to sometimes really get me down or make me feel like कि मेरी creativity के सामने एक like दीवार है and I can't push through would be, I mean, sometimes you do get the client sometimes that doesn't have any idea what they're looking to communicate, but they just want what they call nice pictures or beautiful pictures and very sida. And there's no connection between the model or myself or the set or the background. And there's just a very, it's very everything is very flat, is what if I had to communicate it that way, I'd call it flat, because there's nothing, there's no story that's coming out of it. So I used to have a lot of trouble when it came to fashion, having to sacrifice my own vision or my own ideas in terms of putting first whatever client wanted it. And you do have to put your ego on the back seat, and you have to put your own desires on the back seat. And when you are when you're doing something like photography, you feel like you should have complete creative license to do whatever you want to do because you are the photographer. But the reality is that you're one small cog in a very large machine, and you have to learn to balance yourself between what you really want to do and what the client really wants you to do. So the things that I felt like I could do most that communicated things. So like Zara used to say, okay, go out and do street photography. And okay, the urs of Data, during the urs and Data Darbar ke
Yeah.
samne, I went out and I took all these pictures, and that was completely free, right? There was no team, there was no production crew, there were no models, there were no reflectors and lights. There was just one person walking through, and as I walked, I experienced everything with the camera. And at some points I didn't even know what I was taking pictures of, but I was just taking it as I went, and I was experiencing something entirely different, versus these very big shoots where there's like a lot of people on set, and to get that perfect picture where the dupatta is straight and the shirt is straight and everyone's like aligned, like perfection to me is absolute imperfection, because it's such a perpetuated lie. At the end of the day, we don't look like that, our clothes don't look like that, that's not the reality, that's not how we live our lives. So why communicate something that isn't true to the public? But like, you do have to balance, you have to find where what you want to do matches with what somebody else wants to do, because this is a job at the end of the day, and you have to show up and you have to work, and you have to, regardless, put your own desires aside and try and find a way to find the best possible result for everybody involved. So I separate a lot of my work, and even on my Instagram, I feel like I'm careful about what I curate on it. Like, I don't put every picture from every photo shoot that I've ever done. I pick and choose the ones that I have done, and um, then I put those up, because I feel like those pictures most represent the moment that I'm looking for during the shoot. So yeah, it's tough. It's definitely a difficult balance between, some days I just want to sit on the set and cry and say, I can't do this. Like, mujhse nahi ho raha. And I won't be able to communicate what you want best, because I like the slight imperfection of things, the movement of things, the non-obviousness of an image. Like, I don't want when the viewer looks at an image to look at it and say, this is a bridal outfit and this is just a model and that's it. For me, it's always about wanting to capture a particular moment in that space and time that makes the subject of the image the most vulnerable. That's what I love. But if you're asking about fashion, yeah, you don't always get to do what you want to do. You have to do what's required of you.
Yeah. So you talked about Instagram and curating that space, but you've seen how this um, photographers on Instagram, fashion photographers, commercial photographers on Instagram, it's really like there is a lot. ठीक है, बहुत सारे लोग काम कर रहे हैं, Instagram भर चुका है commercial, fashion, bridal के कामों से, and we do see के हर इंसान एक photographer है, और हम deny भी नहीं कर सकते ये fact. So what do you want to say about this? के do you like it? Do you don't like it? Do you think it's a competition? Maybe you think it's okay. What is your opinion about it? Because now a lot of people
I
are
think
not going back and forth. like you did in your time,
Yeah.
or if I did, or other people did. A lot of people are not going back and forth. They're like, no, we're fashion photographers and this is our virtual space and this is how we curate stuff. So what do you want to say about that?
I think with this advent of social media and how much it's bombarded our lives in the necessity to put up every single thing that we experience. So by extension, everyone that follows us is experiencing our experiences at the same time in this real-time world where your Insta story is of you at an event and everybody else can see it, or you're taking pictures. It's a that personal space I feel like has been invaded. And I do it too. I put up my own videos of my stuff and whatever else. But I try and create a balance between how much someone can view my life. And I think that balance is important for our mental health, because while everyone is a photographer, while we all have phones, while we all have the ability to capture something or the other, some things should remain for oneself, for the privacy of your life, so you can enjoy. Because when your life is for public consumption and everybody else's life is for public consumption, you inevitably do end up comparing yourself, and you do feel like there's a lot of competition, and that can get very stressful, and that can get depressing at times, and it can feel like there's this giant weight on your shoulders of having to constantly perform. So sometimes when I look at other photographers on Instagram, I'm blown away by how brilliant they are, and then I start to put self doubt within myself. Am I doing the best that I can? Is this the imagery that I want to be portraying? Why aren't I doing something more creative and cool? I like it puts these negative thoughts constantly, and it is tough for me. So my husband has taught me a couple of tricks of having to disconnect from this life and put it aside sometimes, because it's not okay to constantly have yourself immersed in this experience of this virtual world where there's so many things that you're absorbing, and your eye is constantly looking at things all the time, from people's pictures to their events to their photography to everything. There's so much going on that it's sometimes too much and it becomes overwhelming. And I do think that with everything, there are pros and there are cons. Yes, I think the pro is that everyone has developed a certain essence and a style to themselves that they've been able to communicate with their phones and their photography. And it's interesting to kind of look at how people do that and how they execute their photography. But on the downside, I feel like it becomes overwhelming at times to constantly see this and constantly feel like you in return also have to be performing at this high rate. There are more, for me right now, there are more photographers in Pakistan that there have ever been. There are more female photographers, there are more male photographers, young photographers, old photographers, everybody. There's and the competition is really, really high. And sometimes that can get scary and overwhelming, that oh my goodness, ab meri bhi bari aa chuki hai, I better keep going. Uh, so I think, yeah, it's a give and a take. There are pros, there are cons. You have to somehow navigate through all of that to find a nice balance on how that can be positive information that you're receiving, but then know when to cut it off when it starts to feel like it's too much.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do that. I take a break entirely from work, from my phone, from everything. I shut it off and say, okay, that's it. I need to mentally recharge. This is a lot of imagery for my mind to also absorb. And you need to detox from all of that sometimes.
Yeah, but then like how do you, because in your work you talked about intimacy, right? Magar and aesthetics. Magar, if there's so much data and information and pictures and everything coming your way all the time, how do you differentiate good photos? Like you said, good pictures. So when you're looking
Mm.
at your Instagram and something is coming on your feed, how do you say, okay, this is daily content and this is something that would inspire me? How does that happen?
So it's almost instinctual. So when you go to any shoot, you're taking like what, 2,000, 3,000 pictures for the day. And then you have to sift through all that content to come out with maybe 5 or 6 really strong images, 10 campaign images, and then whatever else. But in my mind, I know that when I'm shooting, the day of the shoot, I'm fairly quick. When I don't take my time. I actually know what I see, and I take the picture there and then. I know when I've taken that one picture that I feel the most connected to in that very moment is the only picture I want to edit. So I'll keep it in my mind. I know that it was that moment, that was the frame, this was her movement, this was the body language. That's what I want. And it will be an intimate connection between me and that image that will happen so organically that I won't have to think about it. I'll know that that's the one I know. That's the one I love. That's the one I connect with the most. And when I edit all those images, so let's say a client wants like 45 or 50 image collected, or 100 images collected together and edited and sent off to the client, then I spend the next few days going through those images over and over and over again, connecting with each one on a very personal level, thinking which one do I want for my social media, which one communicates best what I wanted to in that shoot. What is the moment that I was looking for between me and my subject that I can best describe with this one single image? So it's a very slow process. That's why I see a lot of people who post on their Instagram like every single day. I actually take a few days, a week, maybe 10 days. And I know that's not the rule for social media. You're supposed to be fast. But I take my time between what goes on my feed. I don't let anything go up there because I'm careful about what it is I want to say, when it is I want to say it. On my Insta story, I feel like I'm a little more relaxed because that's immediate gratification that people want to see, right? It's for क्या like आप देखते हैं 5 सेकंड के लिए before you actually skip to the next story. You're never really engaging with it so much. So if my audience isn't going to engage with it as much as I want them to, I don't want to invest so much time on that. So that's for the 45 images that I've edited. I can put them all on Insta story without worrying so much, but I curate it on my feed because that's my calling card. If anybody wants to see what kind of photography I do, I want them to know this is the imagery that I like to put out. You may want something else, but this is Aleena. Like, this is how I can best describe myself and how what I see when I look at the world. So I make a very clear distinction between my Instagram, how it's curated, what goes up, what doesn't go up. And a lot of the time I get clients who be like, I love these pictures, but that's not what I want for my page. So it's fun.
Yeah, so you talked about curation, you talked about Insta, you talked about detox from social media, you talked about how your description, and you talked about how you look at the world. But in all of this, do you believe that a photographer should have a style? And do you think that you would want to develop, or you have developed the style and you would want to continue that? Or do you think that it's just like a process and maybe you just kind of evolve and you grow and your style can change? Or maybe in fashion industry, you think that there has to be a style to survive in the industry. Uh, what do you think about this?
So I think whether you want to or not, every photographer does inadvertently have a style. No two people can take the same picture of one thing. I can stand next to another photographer, and I've done the mood photography while there's another guy. So Nadir can do the campaign, I will do the mood photography. It's the same frame, but we will capture it entirely differently. So whether you want to or not, you are always putting your style in your photographs. You can tweak them left and right to match the needs of either your client or the industry, or you can tweak them left and right to meet your needs. I think to survive in the industry, to keep going until we're maybe at a space where we can accept more, you do have to have a basic understanding of what the client wants. And the client at large, when you're looking at the demographics that we're looking at, which are vast demographics, and they go beyond our little elite bubbles of Lahore, Karachi, and Islamabad, and they transpire to a multitude of people who have access to phones and social media. So everybody now has it. You have to think about a balance between what they want to see and what you want them to see. So you do have to learn how to do commercial work. I had to learn how to do it. I didn't really want to, but I had to learn how you operate these studio based lights and how to get very clean, neat shots without anything, like, and how to perfect everything and don't add any grain and make sure it's very sharp. I did have to learn it. And I think that it's an important skill for everybody to learn. And once you have your basic like skills down, then you do have the leniency to be a little more creative with yourself. So I feel like it's both. You have to survive at the end of the day. There are so many different brands. Everyone will want what they want at the end of the day. You can't stick your heels in the ground and say, nay, I only want to do what I want to do. You have to learn how to balance, and you have to learn how to give in a little bit. And for me, I think my style in particular has constantly evolved. It started with actually completely faceless images, just very cropped small details of either the shirt or hands or the background. And there were extreme details of a shoot that I wanted to show that didn't exist during the campaign. So when you see the campaign, you see the model from the top to the bottom and the entire frame and the entire set behind her. My initial want and desire was to show everything your eye wasn't seeing in the first place. That was my initial style. And as I have grown and I've gotten more exposure, and I'm still very, very new at this, like in comparison to other photographers, I'm new. I'm still learning. I'm still developing. There's still a lot more for me to experience. But my particular style, if I had to do it, regardless of any wants or desires from anybody else, my style is to take that one picture where you would assume the subject of my picture doesn't know a picture is being taken. And that's why I call it intimate, because I want a moment of absolute vulnerability in the image where the guard is down and the face isn't perfected and the movement is natural. And that for me is art, is representative of all of us in our most natural and our most true form. We live in a day and age now where everything seems to be so perfected because you have all these apps that change the shape of your face, your nose, your eyes, your lips. These filters are everywhere, and you feel like there's this standard of beauty that you must adhere to. So I want my images to look like, no, there's no standard of beauty. There's a standard of beauty is whatever you want it to be, however you want it to be. A person laying down on a white bed sheet with nothing in the background, not even knowing that someone's taking their picture, is intimate and beautiful to me. I want to romanticize photography without romanticizing beauty standards. So for me, my style, I feel, I hope, will continue to develop. My dream and my hope is that I get to keep doing more photography for myself, for how I see everyone in the world that exists today. And for me, it's not always about creating a concept to a shoot. It's actually about finding the concept within the shoot. So while the shoot's going on, if I can find some moment or two, that's the concept for me. A lot of people have a lot to say through their photography, which I think is amazing. But my style isn't about having a particular concept. My style is about having a particular moment that's shared, and that it's scary how vulnerable it can be. But I also have a commercial style, which is there, like you said. Do I think it's necessary to survive? I do think it's necessary. I do think that maybe one day, inshallah, we'll move beyond the perfected lawn dupattas to knowing that 99% of the time हमारे दुपट्टे किसी कुर्सी के ऊपर रखे हुए हैं and we don't actually hold it. So I hope that we can communicate reality, but yeah, there's maybe not just yet.
Yeah. So you've talked about clients in detail and what the client wants and how it is and the mood boards and the styling and the sets and the budget and locations and sab kuch. So tell me how important and how difficult it is for a fashion photographer to maybe comment or say something about social political issues?
Huh. The reality is, I think that the fashion industry doesn't touch upon these issues, any issues, be it about women's rights or children's rights or whatever is going on, the socio-economic issues that are being highlighted in our country. There's a big disconnect because a lot of the fashion industry does adhere to things that your average person can't really gain. Like if you have these fashion brands, sorry, one second. If you have these fashion brands that have an average outfit that's priced a standard bridal outfit that's priced at what, a few lakh rupees, let's say on average, right? Usse kam to nahi hota. You've already created a distinction between a very class distinction between who can afford yours, who can wear yours, and those who can't. So you have a humongous demographic that can only enjoy through visual connection of these images and these bridal outfits, but they can't really engage in it. And I think there are few fashion brands like Ali Zishan. I like the way that he does highlight certain issues. Let's say he picked upon child marriage, Jahez, things like that, that abolishing very archaic and draconian views that we've adapted into our lifestyle that need to be abolished. But it's not often that you find a lot of fashion designers joining hands with the issues that are currently happening on our day-to-day basis. But we have a case going on, a harassment case between Misha Shafi and Ali Zafar, and you have a large demographic of the fashion industry that still accepts him, right? This and has not highlighted the importance of how difficult it is in the first place for a woman to come out and say her piece, let alone a woman in power to say her piece without being bombarded by this massive demographic that villainized her. And you still have this guy everywhere. And I think it's problematic. And for other issues that I think are sexualization of a lot of things. This new what is it, Slice, that mango drink. There are these images of Mahira Khan with this sexualized mango
Yeah.
all over Pakistan. Now, the sexualization of objects and things in relation to women in 2021 is so problematic. And I feel like at some point, some photographers or art directors or whoever is a part of the shoot needs to stand up and say, this is not the imagery that we want to communicate to young girls today. This is not the imagery we want to communicate to young boys today or anybody, that this is how we operate in a hyper-sexualized manner. On one hand, you have J. Dot, who doesn't have models, right? Because it's so anti-Islamic apparently. And on the other hand, you have this mango sexualized advertisement everywhere, and there's such a polarization of the issues that it's really, really striking to me that this is still happening in today's day and age, that we're still having to have this battle about women's rights, about sexualization, about the acceptance of women in their bodies. Like there's just so many issues that I feel like get so lost and they never get communicated. And when given the opportunity to photograph something, like if you had that one ad for this mango brand or for this mango juice brand, there are a million ways to communicate what you need to communicate without having to sexualize something. And because you sexualize it, and that too with the woman, she's become the object of desire in that image, right? The central image is the object of Mahira Khan with this mango, and it's why?
But do you
Why
think,
was that necessary? And
but
this
do
is
you,
a drink we all drink.
yeah, but do you think this is some influence of Bollywood or maybe coming from somewhere? And do you think we living in Pakistan, we do have this intellect or this sensibility to kind of fire back कि अच्छा ये हमने नहीं करना, या फिर to stand up कि ये हम नहीं कर सकते, but या फिर you think कि ये इतना ज़्यादा influence हो गया, like there are a lot of layers, you know, in the society, like you said कि J dot है और ये है और वो है, बहुत सारी चीजें, एंड इन्फ्लुएंस बहुत बहुत जगहों से आ रहा है. मतलब पहले जब तक सोशल मीडिया नहीं था तब तक तो हमें एक बॉलीवुड इन्फ्लुएंस आहिस्ता आहिस्ता नजर आता था, बट नाउ बिकॉज वी हैव सोशल मीडिया द इन्फ्लुएंस इज कमिंग फ्रॉम एवरीवेयर. So do you think there's going to be, like, you know, there's going to be like a time जब हम कहें कि अच्छा ठीक है ये हमने नहीं करना, या do you think कि sensibility develop हो रही है लोगों में, फोटोग्राफर्स में, आर्टिस्ट में, बिकॉज अपेरेंटली हमारी सोसाइटी में ऐसे भी लोग हैं जो आर्ट क्रिएट कर रहे हैं फॉर दिस, बिकॉज दे बेसिकली एक्सप्लॉइटेड this whole you know, political social thing for like in the foreign land, so they can be accepted as artists. ठीक है, so you think कि ये जो इतना ज्यादा गैप है बीच में, कोई कुछ कर रहा है, कोई कुछ कर रहा है, कोई कुछ कह रहा है, do you think photographers can really bridge a gap? Like photography पाकिस्तान में इतनी ज्यादा है या हो सकती है या पावरफुल है?
I think, I hope that that will happen. I think now probably is the first time in a long time that we have more power than we think we do. Our platforms, our social media pages are our powerful mediums that we can communicate what we want. The question is, how much are you willing to risk at the end of the day? It If you are willing to risk it, if you feel like you have something to stand for, you should stand for it. There are certain arguments that I've had about never ever changing the shape of a woman, of her body, regardless of how it looks. Because I don't believe that that's something that we need to perpetuate to girls anymore. How your body figure is meant to be and how it actually is
should be.
There should be no more distinction. There should be no more distinction.
Yeah.
And I feel like the rest of the world, the Western world that we villainize so much for getting this liberal culture from, actually has started to embrace its natural beauty a lot more than we have. I think they have progressed to the point where they don't edit skin so much anymore. They let it be a little more natural. They don't edit bodies. They are more inclusive of it. They are more like, I see these influencers even in America or the UK that write underneath their pictures, this is unfiltered, this is unedited, this is how we look, because you want, and people are relating to it 10 times more obviously than relating to a model that has the most perfect features and the most perfect skin with like, I hope that now photographers, and I hope that I also have that courage to stand up and say that this isn't what we should be communicating anymore, that we need to move to the next stage, and we need to progress as a society on our views on how we view each other and ourselves to push forward, right? If you are, so I think one of the best mediums right now is your Instagram. You get to communicate, you get to talk about so much. It's scary sometimes because you can get in trouble, because people can pick it up, and what you say can be held against you at any given point. Some, like I sometimes talk about on my social media platform, unprofessionalism. So when I have influencers or whoever show up, you know, hours late to a shoot, or anybody, if it's an actor and actress come late to a shoot, I will say that they were late and I waited for 3-4 hours, and my time is also just as valuable as their time. And why is there a distinction between this influencer and myself just because I'm the one who's taking the pictures? And I've gotten in trouble. People have messaged me saying that, you know, you should be more careful. And but why should we be more careful? Shouldn't they be more careful of other people's time? Shouldn't they be more careful about having a professional relationship? So I hope that now everyone feels safe enough that they can talk about the issues that they want to talk about, and that we can say that this influence of Bollywood, like that, this mango ad, this is actually an ad of Katrina Kaif
Yeah.
from like
Yeah.
2013 or something, and
Yeah.
it's identical, right?
Yeah.
It's down to the juice dripping down her
Dripping. Yeah.
hand. Photograph is identical. There's nothing that's being communicated. Now that's 2000 what 13, 14. This is 2021. We're in 2021 right now. Shouldn't we have developed a little more for ourselves, for our actresses, to be give them a better platform to stand on? Like, Markhan's a feminist. She talks about important issues. She talks about Meri Jism, Meri Marzi. She talks about these things. And
Yeah.
you've taken her and put her on this billboard that 100% takes away from what she really stands on, like what her actual issues are. So I feel like whoever photographed it, and I hope, like, I understand you have to do what you have to do at the end of the day. Work
Yeah.
is work. But I hope that now we're more educated, we are more influenced, we have a lot more exposure than we've ever had before. Use that in a positive way to be able to create something that we can be proud of at the end of the day. Like, I don't think we're proud of these ads. I don't think when we're driving, if you're driving in the car, I'm driving in the car, I look at that and I'm proud कि ये Pakistan se kaam nikla hai. No, I'm not proud of that. We should be doing our own work. We should be embracing this time where we finally have had more of a voice than we've ever had before.
Yeah.
So I will, at least for myself, I can't speak for other photographers. I know that there are a lot of great photographers, a lot of great female photographers, especially. Like, I'm all for the female photographers who've been doing phenomenal work. And I know, and I believe that they also will be putting some boundaries in place on what is required to communicate to the audience and what is required to communicate to the audience, and that we should embrace ourselves a little bit more. That's why I love Zara as a brand, because Zara Shahjahan has always embraced the Desi culture
Yeah.
and our heritage and where we come from and what our roots are. And she's never wavered on that. It's never been about Gucci bags or LV bags in the photograph. It's actually been about Pakistanis and there are and how we look and what our colors are, how we dress, how we look on a day-to-day basis. So I hope that other brands will also shift towards a more natural embracement of women especially, and I hope photographers will also equally want to stand up for that particular view now.
Yeah. But like you have, you have a fine art degree and you studied psychology, and then you did marketing, business administration along with your fine arts degree. Do you think, and then you were teaching arts. Do you think that in Pakistan, because I do see this, that in Pakistan we don't really have photography degrees and photography grants, and we don't really have, finances or, like a whole system which is kind of supporting photography education, photography research papers, maybe photography photo books, libraries, and stuff like that. Do you think that really um, challenges or maybe बहुत मुश्किल कर देता है overall photography scene ko? Because I know that you meet fashion photographers or female fashion photographers, or maybe just other photographers, street photographers, and you do see, because you have a degree, but you do see that there is this you know a gap of understanding, or maybe like you've talked about so many things and so many layers, and I am sure that that not only comes from your, obviously that comes from your practice and how you evolved, but that also comes from your degree, that also comes from your exposure, and not your degree in fine arts but also your degree in psychology and business administration. So when you see that in Pakistan, do you see that gap कि अच्छा स्कूल्स में नहीं हो रहा, कॉलेजेस में नहीं हो रहा, यूनिवर्सिटीज में नहीं हो रहा, कोई रिसर्च नहीं कर रहा, कोई बात नहीं कर रहा, कोई रिसर्च पेपर्स नहीं लिख रहा, forums नहीं बन रहे? Do you think that really impacts the whole scene?
I think it massively impacts the whole scene. I know that when I wanted to start out with photography, I had a barrier because I didn't have any resource to go to. There were no courses that I could take. There were no people that I could speak to. There was nothing to teach me on how you color grade, color tone, set your camera, set the settings, you name it, nothing. There was nothing. My resource were, by chance, I used to meet these photographers, and one of the first ones that I ever met was Nadir. And Nadir was the first guy to take my camera and show me, okay, this is what your aperture does. This is what your shutter speed does. This is how you control your camera. This is how you do the post part of it. He was probably the only one. And I have met other male photographers who have not been as gracious and not been as kind to share that kind of information, who actually have been very threatened by somebody who's at their shooting the same thing. And there were very few male photographers that I could say or speak to being open about helping me out. So like Shayan, Farhan from Stop Style were brilliant guys, really sweet. But like honestly, like my list is super short. And so not only did I have any resources to go to, there were no colleagues or peers that I could turn to who were willing to give up that information without feeling like it was somehow threatening their practice. And I come from a very education heavy background. My father was the vice chancellor of LUMS. He's been in higher education his entire life. Everyone in my family is very pro education, and based on that, so watching, like going to school in Pakistan and then going to school in America, the biggest difference I saw was the number of resources that we provide to our students over here. In your O levels and your A levels, it's a very much memorization ratta system, right? कि तुमने किताब पढ़ी है, तुम ये तुम्हारा question है, ये तुम्हारा जवाब है, तुम उसको like memorize करो, and then that's it. Like there's no experience of thinking, cognitive thinking that goes on where you express your own ideas and you can communicate them. So when I went to college in America, all of a sudden it was all based on your intuitive thinking. You had to write papers from your perspective, and then you had to cite particular readings that you had found, and aapko usko cite karte the apne paper mein. And I was standing in my class saying, I have 100% don't know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
because I was always taught you read this, you memorize it, and then you answer it, and that's it. And I think more than providing just photography services, we need to start providing an art based educational system where we introduce what art means on a multitude of levels. There's art in film, there's art in photography, there's art in wood making, in sculptures, in pottery, in whatever you want. There's art, and we don't have any kind of system that pushes that part in their children. So you have schools that have art classes, and I remember my art classes. This is a painting, isko chapo. This is Van Gogh's painting, please draw the same thing. That's not art class. Art class is learning about history and the evolvement of a multitude of different artists all over the world, from not only Van Gogh or like Caravaggio to actual artists in Pakistan, to Indian artists, to whatever. Like there's a lot more that we need to be teaching that we're not teaching at this point. And then there are no resources, and then our society doesn't even help build up artist photographers in that sense. No gallery shows photography work. I don't know, I got a lot of gallery owners or art curators that are selling photography and helping other photographers to come up with their ideas and put up an entire show based on an ideology that they had or whatever. That doesn't exist. You can only exist in a photographer in Pakistan as either a nature photographer, and those two are fairly limited, or as a fashion photographer. And the middle part of that is missing. And there need to be courses provided for students of any age to be able to join, from any background to be able to join, so that they can get an understanding of what's happening in the world. I the reason I wanted to do my degree in fine arts in America was because the amount of information that was provided on every different level. Like, it wasn't just this is a drawing class. It was, here's the history of film, here's the history of photography in fashion, in photography in editorials, and this and that. And there were so many things being taught at the same time, and it expanded my mind more than anything else has ever done. And I wish we could provide, I don't know if these exist in universities here like NCA or BNU. I hope that they do, but I think it has to happen on a slightly lower level than that. It needs to start in your O levels, in your A levels, where you, because that's where you start to become the most expressive about yourself. Your body is developing the most. Your hormones are all over the place. You as an adult are growing up. You're trying to understand the significance of where you fit in into society and your future beyond that. And there's so much that you want to express. And the idea of art therapy, which is the idea of being able to express yourself through mediums of art, doesn't exist very strongly over here. And whereas the college I went to was giving your entire degree in art therapy. And if I tried to come back to Pakistan and teach people, okay, if I had a degree in art therapy, it'd be a question mark, wo kya hai? So I think there is something that needs to be, that there does need to be this communication about how you express yourself through art, and what an important medium it is. It can be art, or it can be music, or whatever else. And that umbrella is very large. It encapsulates everything. And I do feel like, if these resources don't exist, maybe photographers who are doing their work right now can host these classes for themselves, for, and I would say honestly, do it for free, because making this a money making scheme is self-serving. I would honestly, like, if whatever limited knowledge I have, I would want to give that or pass that on to somebody else, because if on the off chance it helps them even this much, I know that that makes a difference. And I hope that, I would love that there would be an institution where photographers could get together, discuss these ideas, discuss on how they want to help educate the masses on art and the importance of its existence, and getting grants and applying for grants, because I think that applying for grant system is not very strong.
Yeah.
But applying for grants, so you have at least financial backing to be able to give that, because giving that information or to a student who's like 12 or 13 years old is invaluable. So it's really sad that in this today we don't have those resources. And it was a really big struggle to try and teach myself as much as I could. And the rest I learned from resources abroad. I took online courses, and they were based in the US. And but I should have been able to do that here, which is what I would like for to happen now.
Yeah. I think you have explained everything, Aleena, and in such detail, okay, and with such clarity. I am so happy to have you. One last thing, tell us something fun, some fun fact, some fun story about you.
um, so let's see. My best fun fact is that I have a dog named Burrito,
Oh
who
yes, I
is my
know.
absolute companion in
Who
life.
attacked me once.
And yes, yes,
और मेरा
she
सारा
just has
डर
so
निकल
much.
गया था. सब डर निकल गया उसके बाद
Yeah, she has
मेरा.
so much love. And I think my favorite part about her is that she has so much love for everybody. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be coming to my house to rob me. वो फिर भी तुम्हें प्यार देगी. Like, and I love that fact. And she's the light of my life, and the bane of my husband's existence, because he did not want a dog. And I've been living in Lahore for about 5 years. I'm not from Lahore. I'm not an LGS girl. I'm not anything. I'm not an NCA girl or a BNU girl. I have no connection to Lahore, except for the fact that my family has always been from here. My dada, dadi, interesting fact, my dadi is Austrian, and she married my grandfather when they went to Queen's Mary University in England. And he brought her home one day and introduced her to his entire Desi family and said, "Ye meri biwi hai, meri gori biwi hai," and that was it. And she didn't speak a word of Urdu, and today her Urdu is amazing. So it's interesting. I come from a huge background. I have a huge family. My dad has 7 brothers and sisters. They all have children. We are all very close. We make it a point that at least once or every 2 years, we have a huge family vacation. We meet for every Christmas, every Easter, every Eid, every occasion. So family is a really, really, really strong part of my identity. And it's been the driving force behind almost everything that I have done.
That is that is so
Nobody
cool.
wanted to see that I was like trying to like signal them.
So cool. Thank you, Aleena. Thank you for coming. I had so much fun talking to you because you explained everything. And I'll see you soon. Maybe we can talk about some more photography stuff. But abhi ke liye, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking out time and doing this.
Not at all. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Rabania.
Thank you. See you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.